Hey everyone, Jon Sofen here for CardsChat. We have a cool feature for you today. I have a special guest who is one of the favorites in poker media, Robbie Strazynski over at CardplayerLifestyle.com. It's the Cardplayer Lifestyle blog's 10-year anniversary. Robbie's been doing this for a decade. I have him on the phone right now from Israel. Robbie, how's life in the Holy Land?
Shalom. How you doing, Jon?
Hey, Robbie.
Doing great. I'm doing great. Is the interview in English or in Hebrew, Jon?
Well, I think we'll have to stick with English, given the fact that I don't speak any Hebrew.
Thank God. I've been here for over 21 years, and they're like, I don't speak Hebrew either. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is it? What is it? Is it most people in Israel do speak Hebrew, though, right? But you have a lot, because people like you, who are American transplants, you came from Southern California. Now, most people most of the people that come over from America, do they also speak Hebrew or no?
Well, not like native speakers, obviously, but people who move from wherever in the world to Israel, they sort of tend to have a reason, usually be Jewish and have some sort of like a Hebrew day school education or something. So they've got like the basics, a little bit beyond shalom. But when I speak Hebrew to someone, they ask me, "What did you get here just recently?" Because the accent just really, it's like I just got off the plane. So.
Yeah, shalom is the extent of my Hebrew knowledge. I believe that means hello and goodbye, correct?
That's right.
That's right. All right, so let's go back 10 years to November 2009. Now, you penned your first blog post at Cardplayer Lifestyle. I believe it was on the 27th or the 28th. Now, did you have any plans for the site at that time in terms of one day monetizing it? Or were you just a poker fan who just kind of wanted to give your thoughts about poker and didn't really think anyone would ever read it?
Well, that's a good question. I would never write something that I didn't think anyone would ever read, but I certainly had no, pretensions that, millions of people are going to read this someday. I was hoping people were going to read it. I had no idea how I would get people to know about it other than sort of like friends, family, that sort of a thing. Social media back in 2009 wasn't anywhere nearly as developed, like Facebook and Twitter were around. And if you were like one of the early adopters, good on you. You could get a nice audience quickly. But this was something, it was actually a part-time project, like a nights and weekends kind of thing that I started with a friend of mine, shout out Avi Bookbinder. He knew like all about webmastering and how to create websites and HTML and all the computer know-how. And he says, Robbie, we just had a conversation, and he's like, you know how to write, you kind of know poker. And again, this is just a couple guys living here in Israel talking. Why don't we do a blog and see what happens, and maybe we can make a little money off of it. So sort of an indirect answer to your question, but at the time there was no dream of, oh wow, one day I'm gonna quit my job or anything like that. It was just like, hey, let's give it a try and see what happens.
Now, what were you doing for a living at the time? What were you?
Right. So I was a regular employee. I don't remember, it's 2009. I don't remember exactly which job I had, but it was one of two types of jobs that I basically had over my career as an employee. Some of them were in the teaching English as a second or as a foreign language. So I was, helping to write and edit course books for kids to learn English and mathematics as well. And the other side, completely, totally different industry, was the online gaming industry. Here in Israel is a lot of companies which sort of do like the back end and online marketing, and they just needed a native English speaker to do content writing who understood something about gambling and had been in casinos and has played these sorts of games before. So I was lucky I was able to, whichever industry I was in, find jobs that, hey, they needed a native English speaker, even though I was, out here in Israel.
Right. Now, before I got into poker media, and coincidentally, by the way, my first poker published article was actually at Cardplayer Lifestyle, which
that was the first one? I didn't know that.
I think so. I'm pretty sure. Because see, before that, before I got into poker, I was actually writing about all kinds of different topics. And in doing so, I learned a lot about like what it takes to build a website or a blog. So like my best advice for any new blog owner on any topic is to define your niche and target audience. Now, did you think about those things when you first started writing blog posts at Cardplayer Lifestyle?
That's a great question. I didn't think about it at first. Again, the beginning, it was much more on a whim and let's sort of see what happens. But there was sort of a turning point in that regard. It was, I would say, a Black Friday was one of those things. I was like, well, it was a major story. And I even asked my boss, I was like, can you give me half an hour to just write something? And I believe it or not, I found out on Sunday. So I was like the last guy to find out about Black Friday. I found out on Sunday. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't playing on, it was crazy. So right around when that happened, I was like, okay, so I'm going to write some news stories, got to write something. And I was like, no one's reading this. I can't compete with news sites. I'm just, one guy, and of course I do it part-time. I can't do news. And then a little bit later on in the summer, that's sort of when I bought out my partner, because he was like, I'll do other stuff and develop other websites. And he's like, if you want to go ahead and do this, I'll try to teach you stuff and, go and just, do your best. And that's what I agreed on. And I was like, well, if this is going to be something that I really, this is now 2 years into doing this, Cardplayer Lifestyle, I need to know who my audience is. And I realized like, well, I'm my own audience. I know the kind of stuff I would like to read about. And, I see interviews with people and like, sometimes there's questions I would like to ask them and know the answers to. So it's a little bit of a cop-out, but thankfully over the years, I've proven to be, a good consumer of media enough that I know, at least some people like to read about,
Right. Now, a couple years ago, it's been about a couple years ago when you quit your job and to do it full time. So quitting your job to build a website full time, it's a bit like quitting your job to play poker for a living. I mean, you knew a couple years ago when you did it, you were taking a bit of a risk. When you quit your job to run Cardplayer Lifestyle full time, what was your plan to make sure you don't have to worry about supporting your family? And what was your wife's initial reaction when you told her about your plans?
That's another great question. And I think that, as much as the answer that I'm going to give is sort of specific to my situation, I'm hopeful that, the audience out there at CardsChat will, maybe there's some people out there who, want to quit my job. Maybe if it's not for poker or poker media, it's a risky thing to do. It's not a simple decision, especially if, you've got dependents. I have a wife and 3 kids. I had a good job, good benefits. So there certainly was, stuff that I was giving up. And, one of the major considerations is also financial. And there was, we had a little bit of a meeting with sort of a financial consultant, both of us together. And she sort of flipped the way that we looked at it. And she said, okay, well, these are your expenses. This is how much you think you're going to make. Let's say there's a shortfall of approximately $10,000. Let's just say, is that going to break you? So we're like, well, no. So that's the first thing. And it was like, kind of like making not, like reasonable, educated guesses here, as opposed to just like, what's going to be. And the second thing was, she says, well, let's say, for example, you took $10,000 and wanted to invest it. Can you think of any better investment than yourself?
Right.
And, right. And I was like, well, I know, no one's going to go ahead and say, here, Robbie, here's $10,000, but I could, and I said, I believe in myself. I believe in myself enough to do that sort of thing. And I certainly set for myself sort of like a fail-safe goal. If, I'm unable to make X amount of money in that first year, then this is not viable. And obviously it has to be like a bare minimum. And I understand, businesses will grow. Every business has to start out somewhere. But based on, having done it part-time for about 7.5 years, and revenue sort of, consistently growing month by month, I said, well, I think this is reasonable if I start doing it full time. And, talking with my wife, shout out to Miriam, she's awesome.
Yep.
Really, she is. We're like, okay, you know what? We're going to go ahead and take this as a risk, and we're going to jump full in, and we're going to say it has to be a full year, because as we know, there's ebbs and flows, to the year. Some months are better. Some, like during the World Series, everything is amazing. And then, you hit February or something, it's like, where is everybody?
So but it's like every poker site is like that though too. Like once,
sure.
if you look at website traffic on CardsChat or just any poker site, poker news, doesn't matter. May, June, July, sure. You're way up here, and then it just plummets for most of the rest of the year. But that's poker.
And I would say also there's just sort of natural peaks and valleys to every industry. So, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to give it a shot for 3 months or 6 months, but I think that a legitimate shot to sort of know what will and what won't work, you need to give it a full calendar year. So we agreed to that. And frankly, it was obviously a hope, but sort of the plan was like, okay, I don't ever, like you said, I never want to go back to having a boss and making the commute. And, I just don't want to do that. And I love what I do so much. You know, it was 7 years, or at least the last few years of like, I can't wait till I get home from the job so I can get back to doing my site, you know, to make this cardplayerlifestyle.com thing work. And I said, for this year, I'm basically just going to do my absolute best, work hours that I've never heard of, and just make sure that, you know, by hell or high water, I pass that minimum mark. Thankfully, I did. And, you know, the mark keeps on going up. And thankfully,
That's good.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the content on your blog. Now, for those who haven't seen Robbie's site, Robbie and his contributors write about a lot of different poker-related topics. You'll find some strategy articles, lifestyle articles, interviews, and a bunch of op-eds too. But one thing I've always noticed from your blog and always enjoyed is you aren't afraid to tackle a topic that can be debated, but you stay away from giving hot takes that could anger some readers and poker players, for the most part at least. But for example, like when Sean Deeb and Doug Polk accused Negreanu of cheating to win the WSOP Player of the Year last month, you kind of stayed away from that topic, at least on your blog. Now, do you think your site would be as popular as it is if the content was more controversial?
Okay, so that's a good question, but before I even give you an answer, I want to say I'm really flattered. Thank you very much for paying such close attention.
No problem.
That's really
Yeah.
you know, it's my baby. I put my heart and soul into it. So when someone asks a question that deep, and I really appreciate that you pay attention like that. Thank you.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say that I shy away from every single controversial topic, but well, okay, let's give an example. The
you did have one about a year ago. You did maybe about a year. What was the topic? You got into it with,
I'll tell you.
I can't remember. It's on the top of my head. I know it had something to do with sexism or something. Is that right?
Well, sort of. Yeah, it was the Dan Cates video.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
So I took, you know, like that's the thing. I will write an op-ed every so often, but it won't just be for the sake of getting traffic or becoming more or less popular. That's the thing. I think there's a lot of sites, and it's an understandable, you know, approach or tactic or whatever you want to call it, that, okay, this is the hot button topic, you know, people are mudslinging, let's write something, and, you know, everyone wants to read about it, we'll add some. I get that, and that's legitimate. That's not, you know, necessarily what I want to go ahead and do, but I will certainly write and publish op-eds that I believe in. You know, if I have a particular stance on something like the Jungle Man video, I don't really care too much what people think. You know, if the entire world's against me, I don't mind swimming against the tide. I will go ahead and publish that. And like at the time, you know, every single site was like, wow, this is amazing. We love Jungle Man content. It's wonderful. And I'm sorry for being cynical. And, you know, I don't want to put, you know, Dan Cates in any sort of bad light. A good guy. I'd never really met him. I had no relationship with him. But I particularly, you know, me personally, I took a little umbrage. I was like, well, I don't think this is the way to get women in poker. I don't know why we're necessarily glorifying that. You can get really deep into like Me Too and sex, all that sort of stuff. But like, what I didn't understand is, how is it that on one side we have this industry, yeah, let's get more women in poker, let's do all that stuff, and also like celebrating and lauding and, you know, putting up on a pedestal this type of thing. He wants to do it, great. People want to watch it, great. But why do you gotta like push people towards there? And again, I understand that a lot of people won't agree with me. Many women don't agree with me necessarily, but I'm very passionate about my opinion, and I won't shy away from publishing something in that respect if I particularly have an opinion I believe in.
There you go. Now, when you first started Cardplayer Lifestyle, we were in the middle of the poker boom era back in 2009. Now, the game's popularity back then was at an all-time high. So you got in at a great time. Obviously, you got your start at a great time. Do you think it would be more difficult to build a poker blog from the ground up now than it was 10 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, like, I'll sort of hedge that bet a little bit of, yes, I happened to get in at a great time, but I wasn't full-time by any means, you know, like I almost wish now, man, I really wish I could have, you know, turned back the clock and give it a shot and see what would have happened had I gone whole hog in 2009. I think it's not as easy today for a variety of reasons. The industry is more mature. I think it takes, you know, a lot more resources, or, you know, if you want to just take my approach and slow and steady wins the race, sure, but it'll take you some time. But I think the main obstacle these days is just it's such a content-rich world that we live in. We're not just competing against other poker media sites or poker anything. We're competing against sports. We're competing against Netflix and YouTube. And I remember, I forget who it was, the CEO. Oh yeah, Eric Holreiser told me once. He's like, he spoke with one of the CEOs or one of the main guys at Netflix, and the guy was like, what's your main competitor? He's like, sleep.
Sleep.
Right?
Yeah, because people can't consume media then.
Right. And myself, I'm like, I'm always watching something. And I just sort of feel like if someone were to go ahead and start out today, it would be significantly more difficult. And again, sort of what I said to myself, I didn't do this in the beginning because of the money. I did it because it's something I wanted to do, I was passionate and enthusiastic about. So if that's you out there, whatever the business is, if you're enthusiastic and passionate about something, don't let the fact that there's a Netflix and all that stuff stop you from trying to follow it. Be smart, but enthusiasm is what will carry you for 10 years, not anything else.
And speaking of 10 years, you've hit the 10-year mark at Cardplayer Lifestyle. Now, what can your readers expect from you as we head into 2020?
I'm good. That's it.
That's it. Time to call it today.
I won the bet, John. It's been 10 years now.
Okay.
I can.
I'll take over the site for you. No big deal, right? There we go.
I think I don't want to necessarily reveal any hard plans that I have because not all of them are set in stone. But generally speaking, it sort of hit me. Over already the last year. During year number 9, I was like, man, 10 years is coming up. That's big. That's worthy of celebration. And what I kind of want to try to do, whether it's in terms of 10 themed content or top 10 lists or that sort of stuff, or any sort of extra celebration, but just sort of add that element of hey, it's the 10th anniversary, let's celebrate. Maybe it's a meetup game in Vegas or something like that. Those are the kinds of things I want to do. Generally, try to do bigger things. Not necessarily limit myself based on what I've done before, because what I've done up until now has worked. But I was like, let's maybe take the next logical step, build on that, do slightly more creative interviews, and also just celebration of the 10 years over this next year during my travels abroad, and hopefully meeting people.
Yeah, and people love listicle articles. That's one thing I've learned about writing on the web. People love those listicle style articles. We've done. During the 50, because last year was the 50-year anniversary of the WSOP, I did a bunch of WSOP 50 top whatever and history stuff like that. People like those.
Yeah, that was one of my most popular actually last year. Was 50 tips for something like that, and it's it took me a long time to write that, but I was like,
doesn't it?
50 solid tips, especially if you've never been there before. Why not? The lists are great.
There you go. Now, moving on along your journey, you've met and befriended some famous poker celebrities. Now, I know you have a great relationship with Eli Elezra, of course. He's from Israel, right? Originally,
he's born in Jerusalem.
Israeli, and he served in the military there, correct? Eli did back in the day. Yeah. And also Daniel Negreanu, of course, who was not from Israel, obviously, but
he speaks better Hebrew than a lot of people realize.
Really? Wow.
He had a lot of Israeli friends growing up, so it's pretty interesting.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, so now getting to meet these people, is that the coolest part of your job? Getting to meet all the players you see on TV.
So I'll take an aside again before I answer the question. You mentioned Eli. I will have to I got to put in the plug. I was the translator for his autobiography, so that was pretty awesome.
Nice.
And I got the book. I just have to show here. This is called Pulling the Trigger. Show everybody over there. So get that book. It's awesome. And I don't get anything from it other than just sort of satisfaction. But it's a great book. He's an amazing person, and he and I have become really, really good friends. So to answer your question, at the end of the day, as much as I now sort of do this for a living and love poker media, and I'm a publisher and involved, I'm still deep at heart. I'm a fan. Right. And when I meet one of these poker players for the first time, it's a thrill, especially the biggest name. But even now, there's plenty of people who I've never met before. They're very well established. A lot of the GTO high roller guys, I don't really know them, for better or for worse. And I think it could be cool to get to know them. And it's certainly a thrill. It's awesome. And what I find is, it's sort of natural. I don't consider this networking, but it really just sort of happens naturally. When you interview someone, at least, my interview style, and I can see it's yours also, you do really good research. You have to, when you do that research, you start to feel like you begin to know someone. You put together a good interview, and you sit with them for 15, 20, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it is. And by definition, you're sort of, you've just spent a really intense and beautiful hour with somebody. And pretty much without fail, almost everyone who I've interviewed, especially in person, I have relationships with them. And that, I think, is really amazing. And I'm really grateful, for that.
Absolutely. Now, for those who don't know, Robbie lives in Israel, but he grew up in Los Angeles. If I recall correctly, you told me you moved to Israel as a teenager, right?
Yeah, I was just before I turned 17, I moved here. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we all know you're passionate about poker, obviously, and the poker laws are strict where you live. Now, how often do you get to play, and where do you usually play?
How often did you say?
Yeah, how often, yeah.
So, we don't have casinos or poker rooms here in Israel. So what I have is home games, and I've embraced that wholeheartedly. I've got, like my game that I play in locally here with my buddies, and then my dad has a home game, about like 30, 40 minutes away where he lives from here, and I play with them as well. And I have a nice little sort of group of buddies, like a little mini community. So that's, that's where I really get to play. That's my bread and butter is the home games, and we get all the different variants and stuff. So I can get my reps in. Can't really play online poker from here either. So how often? I'd like to try and play once a week. It doesn't always work out, family man commitments and all that sort of stuff. But I try to get once a week. It's the rare occasion where I'll get like twice in 1 week, and that's pretty nice. I kind of feel like I'm cheating or something. So that's good. But I've been very fortunate over the last couple of years, have traveled abroad quite a bit to all of the different events, notably the World Series especially. And, pretty much any time I ever travel anywhere, like my first thing is like, do they have a poker room? Can I play or something like that? So I do.
Like that too.
Yeah, and we all love the game. And it's, you can imagine, if someone's like, you can have anything you want in the room, just don't touch that water. When the water finally becomes available to you, you want to chuck that thing. So I put in quite a few hours and don't sleep much when I'm on my trips.
That's right. Now, so since you've traveled, and I know obviously you've traveled all over the world, like you said, to cover and cover different poker events. Now, what are some of the poker rooms that every poker player should have on their bucket list?
Commerce in Los Angeles. Yeah, that's the
okay. You're a little biased since you're from LA. I actually like you like that better than the bike.
Okay, so the bike also, but I'll tell you what it is. Like I sort of romanticize it. And yes, I am from LA, but again, remember, I left when I was 16.
That's
so
true.
The first time I ever played in Commerce was very much as a visitor, as a tourist. And I walked in and it's just like, wow. It's not the World Series, but it's pretty much as close to it as you can get. And you can have that any day, 365 days a year. And that's really amazing. I mean, you have the huge Southern California metropolitan market there, of Los Angeles, millions of people. That's the dream. Every room, whether it's online or live, you need liquidity. They've got the people, and there's always people playing. And what I specifically like also, both the bike and in Commerce, because of that liquidity, you have so many people, you can find any game. You're not just going to find, 25 tables of 1-2, 1-3, no limit, and then another 2-5, no. And then the 40-80 stud game, right? You can find a 50-cent, $1 stud high-low game at the Commerce most days a week, and I love that. It's really a paradise for anyone. So, definitely hit up those two Southern California card rooms. I love the rooms in Vegas. They're really nice. South Point is a nice room. It doesn't always get the mention. We all know like the big ones, so I want to point out, highlight one of them that doesn't always get love.
Not to interrupt you, but actually, while you mentioned South Point, I'm helping a friend this weekend at South Point run a charity poker tournament. So
awesome.
Yeah, South Point Saturday night, 7 p.m. I think it's a $130 buy-in out at South Point. So,
yeah.
But I'll be out there.
It's off the strip. I think the people, when you go and visit Las Vegas, especially if you're not from Southern California, you don't always have a car there. So you don't necessarily venture much, to be on the strip or anything. It's, what is it, a 10-minute drive, something like that from the strip?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's even that.
And
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
great. It's really wonderful. And, they also realize where they're located. And I think they appreciate your business and when you go there.
Mhm.
So it's a friendly room, a lot of locals there. I think that's pretty nice.
What about outside
Um,
the United States? Do you like to play, or do you prefer?
well, I just came back from a little trip that I took to Prague in the
Hmm.
Czech Republic. And I really enjoyed that place. There's quite a few poker rooms there. I planned my location. I'm right in the heart of the city. I was literally within a 10-minute walk of three different poker rooms.
Nice.
There was the Showdown, there was the Ambassador, and then there's Rebuy Stars. And
Mhm.
all three of those rooms, they were nice. It's a little dead during midweek, middle of the
Right.
day. It's not Vegas, it's not LA, but at nights, there's definitely some action. And in terms of Europe, I haven't yet been to Razvadov.
Okay, I was just going
Obviously,
to ask you if you'd been to King's Casino, so the
I
answer
have
is
not been
obviously
there
no.
yet.
Okay.
I do hope to get there at some point, but not just sort of like midweek, like the Prague vacation I took, because
Mhm.
everyone kind of knows like there's not much else to do there besides poker.
Yep.
So if I'm going, I would kind of want to go to like cover an event there and then just sort of see what it's like, and sort of like a work play type of trip.
Mhm.
And I would love. I haven't been there again yet. Hopefully, I get to go someday. There's two particular rooms I would love to go to. One is Dusk Till Dawn. That's Rob Young's room in Nottingham in England.
Mhm.
And I
Oh
just,
yeah.
for years, well before Rob Young, recently just, re-rose to prominence, I always heard about this Dusk Till Dawn. It looked awesome. So I hope I get to go there someday. And the Playground in Montreal. I've
Yep.
heard some really awesome things about it. And, you just, especially when you're in the industry and, you're always hearing about these rooms and
Mhm.
tournaments there. It's like, you can only hear about it so many times before you say, okay, you know what, damn it, it's time. We gotta get there. So that was nice. But for just like a little vacation, you want some low stakes action. Prague is great, and one of the reasons I chose that place in particular, really inexpensive, generally speaking. The
Mhm.
stakes you play for are like $1, $2, or even lower than that you can find.
Mhm.
And everything else in the city is pretty cheap. It's relatively cheap to get there. And hey, I'm a religious Orthodox Jew. They've got a lot of great kosher restaurants, which you can't
There you
take for
go.
granted. That was
You
nice
don't
too.
have many of the, when you come to Vegas. I know I've talked to you about this before, but there's not very many kosher options here, right? We
Well,
don't
it's
have.
all relative. It's all
Right.
relative. If you are in the Bahamas, there's zero kosher options there. You got to bring the food with you, or
Oh
go to
boy.
a supermarket or something
Mhm.
like that. The fact that you've got at least a good half dozen places in Las Vegas, great
Mhm.
restaurants. You got meat restaurants, dairy restaurants. They're all separate with you when you keep kosher. And I actually wrote a blog post about this. How to keep kosher in Las Vegas during the World Series, but
Oh,
pretty much any time of year. You've got like supermarkets with like big kosher aisles. So for someone who doesn't necessarily observe the dietary laws of keeping kosher, it always seems hard. And, frankly, it's a little bit of a pain, I'll be honest, but when you sort of know that that's what you have to do anyway, you do the research in advance, and you could say, oh, okay, well, I've got a few options here, and you sort of plan around that. And, when I'm there for a couple of weeks, I'll go to the supermarket and buy a whole bunch of like groceries and fruit, and sort of like put for myself in the little mini fridge in the hotel, like a grab and go. So I've got like my fruit and my sandwich, whatever, and then I go, each day out and take my food with
how often do you have a cheat day?
me.
I wondered. I always wondered. I've got relatives. I got a lot of Jewish relatives. I wonder. I do have one who lives in New York, and she keeps strict kosher like you. But it's funny when she comes to family gatherings or whatever. We don't cook kosher. So, but she still eats with
That's
us a little bit,
That is so funny. I've never even thought about that concept, because it's
like a
more of
cheat
like,
day.
you adopt a
Weight loss.
particular lifestyle of like, there's no like, I would think in advance, okay, ain't nobody gonna see me now. Let's get the ham or the cheeseburger. That
Well,
just wouldn't sort of,
more like when you're on the road, and I mean, you can't starve
right,
yourself to death. You can't starve yourself to death. But
right,
say you are in the Bahamas, where you say,
yeah.
like, now the PCA is gone, but in the past, what do you do if there just isn't any kosher options? And
Right. So, I mean,
you're hungry.
obviously, like if you really get to a situation where you're like, dying in the desert or whatever it is,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sanctity of life overrules any sort of keeping kosher or anything like that. So you got to live. But I take canned goods. You can, those stay good for a long time. canned corn, canned green beans. You buy a loaf of bread, and I don't really go really for more than a week anywhere, so that the bread kind of lasts. You have these, I don't have it with me or anything, but these self-heating meals, like they were developed actually for, I think, the U.S. Army or the Navy,
Military,
when they're
that's what
out.
I figured.
Yeah, when they're like out in the middle of nowhere, you literally just add water, you put it in the box, and it's like the size of like a little airplane meal. You get like spaghetti and meatballs, you got like chicken parmesan. Is that what it's called? Chicken parmesan?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
right.
Have you ever eaten that stuff though?
Oh, well, again, if the choice is that or starve, I'm gonna go with that. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
go prepared. I bring my little chewy granola bars, for snack, or fruit. Fruit's kosher, so you can always eat that. Vegetables. You could eat salad, but I don't eat salad just out of preference. I don't like it. But
Really?
it's
Okay.
if you're used to like the dietary laws, you kind of know, you figure it out. But yeah, there have been times where I just sort of said, man, this is like I'm stuck here. All right, I'll have a bagel, and I don't know if it's kosher or not, but I'll get the whole wheat, and hopefully it's not cooked in pig fat or anything like that. So.
Yeah, right. There's great poker events and poker rooms all around the world. Don't get me wrong, but the main action, especially WSOP and a lot of the high rollers, are in Las Vegas now because of that and what you do for a living. Have you ever considered moving back to LA just to be closer to the poker action in Vegas?
The answer to that question is yes, but no. There was one period of time, and I've been here, 21 years now in Israel, where I did consider moving back to LA, but it wasn't for that reason. There was one period of time, we were married for about a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And it was just a period of time in my life where I wasn't able to find work. We were struggling, and it was just a tough time. And I was just sort of saying, we're adults now, we got to figure this thing out. And my wife, she's sort of like me, like a dual, U.S. American and Israeli citizen, but she didn't grow up there. She grew up here when she was 3, and for her, it wouldn't be going back. It would be really going. She'd never really lived there at all, except until she was 3 years old. So the reason, was just like, I'm not really sure I can make it at all or anything like that. This is like 2004 or something like that. Where I once considered that, and it was more of just like, I don't really know what to do. Maybe that's the answer. It was a brief consideration for like, I don't know, between 1 to 3 months, and then things got better. Found a job, and pretty much everything was okay. More specific to your question with regard to the poker, I miss it. I do feel that I don't like using the word sacrifice, because it's as though I could do better or something, that sort of thing. But I know why I live here, and I believe, as a Orthodox Jewish person, that for religious reasons I live here. Let's just sort of leave it at that, and ideological reasons. And this is where I want my kids to grow up, and it's great. Unfortunately, one of the the consequences of that is, well, we just don't have poker here, and that just kind of stinks. Were this not a consideration of living somewhere for religious ideological reasons, I'm pretty certain then, I may have ended up back in LA or in Vegas. It's relatively cheap to live in Las Vegas. You got everything you need. Nice big Jewish community there as well. Schools. It's a nice place to live. You just don't have water, is my understanding. You don't have water for much longer, so just stock up on those
We'll
bottles.
see about that. We'll see about that. Yeah, that's what they say. But
yeah, every time I go there for the last 4 summers now, I've been for the World Series. It's just like, oh my God, this is just poker heaven. And but I will say,
not like that all year, though. I will say
right. It's not like that all year.
Not as crazy.
And I will also say, I've sort of come to realize after all these years of living here, there's something about the scarcity of something which always makes it enticing. And it's possible that if I did live in Las Vegas or Los Angeles and always have it available, I don't know that I would always be as enthusiastic as I continue to be. The fact that, Israel, you can't really drive anywhere where, you're not going to drive to Lebanon or Syria or Jordan or Egypt or anything. You want to go somewhere, you fly. And every time that happens, it's an exciting thing. It's a trip. Oh, yes, I get to go and play poker. And there's something about that. I'm a recreational player. If I was a professional, different story, and, whatever. But as a recreational player, that sort of always keeps that I don't know, the luster, it always keeps it there. And it makes me just really enjoy every time I'm abroad and appreciate the opportunities.
Cool. Now let's say you never discovered poker, or you never saw it as an opportunity to make money in this industry. What do you think you'd be doing for a living right now?
Writing, journalism,
Right.
editing, that sort of thing.
Any
I studied.
specific topics you'd want to cover other than poker to write about?
So I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I still do. I love language. I ended up, in university here in Israel, actually. I studied English linguistics at Bar-Ilan
Okay.
University. So, the idea of, writing language as a science, that always attracted me. So that's why I say I certainly still, I think, would have ended up doing writing, editing in some capacity. What industry? I don't know. Again, it would be coupled with the fact that I live here, so I'd have to find something that's hiring that enables me to make a living.
Mhm.
Sports is fun to write about, I suppose. I don't really know. It's funny. I've been doing this for so long. It's difficult to imagine writing about other things. And as a matter of fact, every so often, when I was an employee, and even now, you get approached with like freelance writing opportunities. And sometimes, okay, you got to make a buck, and you do what you can. You take on projects, or the money's good, or whatever it may be. But most of the time, especially now, it's just like, man, I don't want to write
Don't
about
do
that. I
it.
want to write about poker. I love it. I'm a
Yeah.
purist. Blockchain, and crypto. This is the hot thing, and esports. I'm like, okay, that's great, and more power to you. I don't know. I'm not excited about that.
I think that's about all the questions I got for you. It's always good to talk to you, Robbie.
Likewise, this was so enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah, and make sure you check out his site, cardplayerlifestyle.com. It's his 10-year anniversary. Congratulations on that, Robbie, and good to talk to you.
Well, John, this was really awesome. I really appreciate it. It's good to talk to you too, and hopefully see you at the World Series, if not sooner.
Well, for sure. Absolutely. Have a good one, Robbie.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.